morals over money. Put your morals over money.
That we will uphold against anyone that stands against us.
Hello and welcome to the Truth Trumpet. I'm Beth.
And I'm Steve.
And we are live tonight on this lovely Friday evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Thought we would do something a little different tonight and have a live question and answer period with our audience. So we're hopeful that we'll get some people to tune in. We did receive some questions ahead of time, so we're going to probably start with those. And as we are broadcasting, we're going to check comments, so you can type in your questions, comments, concerns, criticisms into the chat, and we will read them on the air.
Yeah, help us out, guys. This is the first time we're doing a live question and answer. So type it in, ask a question, talk it in, however you do it. Ask a question, make a comment, whatever you want to say. Anything of the past shows we've done, anything on the global political landscape, something going on in your hometown, a personal issue, your personal issue, not our personal issue. Whatever it is you want to talk about, let's hit the waterfront.
Yeah, maybe there's some guests you'd like to see in the future. Maybe you think you'd make a great potential guest. Actually, I wanted to give out our email address, which is thetruttrumpet@hotmail.com. If you are interested in being on the show, you have an interesting story, interesting profession, hit us up at our email. And if it's something we think our audience would like, we'll be in touch.
Yeah, and on that note, if you do have, I wouldn't say an interesting story, because everybody, to be frank, everybody does have an interesting story. If you have, something beyond an interesting story, meaning something to do with the pandemic, something to do with corruption, something to do that's extraordinary. Like I could tell a story about my father who died from the COVID vaccines. But guess what? I imagine most people don't want to hear that type of story because it's not upbeat, number one. And two, most people out there have a similar story. So as much as it's a good story, it's a very similar story. So if you have something that kind of shoots slightly over the average story that we all have, you were in a hospital during the pandemic or now, because it's all crappy healthcare, and they didn't come check on you for 24 hours, or they tried putting you on a respirator, something a little, I don't want to say above average, but you get what I'm saying as I ramble on. You understand what I'm
Something
talking about.
Unique.
And definitely if you have audio or video footage of something that you might not want to share because it might you might be afraid to share it yourself, or it might bring negative light on you, bring it to us, bring it to Beth, bring it to me, and I will cherish your confidentiality, and I will expose whatever it is that you have. Vet it and expose. We'll get the info out there.
For sure. So the first thing we're going to start with today is basically a follow-up to a story we did back at the beginning of September. It was a broadcast called This One's for the Children. I'm actually going to bring it up on screen for you.
And it's regarding the vaccination schedule, or the forms for the vaccination schedule that our health department insists on being involved in our life and our children's lives. So we did an episode on basically step-by-step on how to acquire the documentation for the exemption, fill it out, get the affidavit, and submit it. So we can go over that. And as I let other people know, I was contacted after this episode saying there are people that don't want to or don't feel they should have to submit any of the documentation because whose business is it to know our personal medical information? And you're absolutely right. Nobody should have to. Nobody should feel the need they want to. Yet this is the predicament we're in. So these forms are for the people who want to fill it out and I'm not going to say risk potential whatever outfall from the health department or government down the road, a year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it might be, with the legalese and wording of that paperwork. But your kid will attend school and there'll be no speed bumps. Or you can go the route I'm personally going, which is to not submit the forms and see where the chips fall. I mean, not just see where the chips fall. I'm going to take action as well, because the health department will eventually meet with myself and the school and come to heads. And I've been told many times in my life, you're the immovable object. And there's what's that saying? What happens when a irresistible force meets an immovable object? Well, I'm that immovable object. And health department, you can be a irresistible force. Try pushing up against me. We'll see what happens. And I will be a bellwether for other people out there. And there are people before me who have done this, and I'm going to look to them in the paperwork and things they filled out. But that's a story for another day. Go ahead.
So we're just going to do a quick recap. We have gotten a lot of feedback as of late. Apparently, the public and Catholic school system and some private schools are starting to put the pressure on parents that they need to have their children's immunization records up to date. And many have been given notice that if they do not submit their up-to-date records within a certain time period, that their child will be suspended, in some cases 20 days, in some cases indefinitely.
That's something we want to hear about too, by the way, because I'm not exactly sure how that works. Some people have received letters stating indefinitely suspension. If not filled out by whatever time, then an indefinite suspension would happen. Me personally, the one I got was 20 days on the color printed little brochure that they hand out to make sure your child is immunized. But yeah, 20 days. So is it public school that has one suspension rate and Catholic or private that has a different? I'm not sure the answer yet, but there is a difference. They exist.
So if you have received this form and you would be willing, we would really appreciate it if you emailed us. Again, we would keep your information confidential. We just want to be able to give people in our audience the information and kind of know what the different school boards are sending out to the parents. So I will put the instructions on the screen for you. I apologize, it's probably not the largest, but I am going to read it out. And again, please go back to our Rumble video from September called This One's for the Children. That literally gives you a step-by-step guide as to how to navigate the system, as well as shows you exactly what the forms look like. And this is for Windsor, Essex County only. Now, the first form in question is from the Government of Ontario website. So I believe that form is provincial wide. However, the actual process is going to vary depending on what city and municipality or county you're in. So you will have to do a little research if you live, say, in Chatham-Kent or another region in the province. So this, again, is for Windsor, Essex County. So if your child is in grade school or high school, you can go to the following website, which is www.forms.ssb.gov.on.ca. In the quick search bar, you will type in statement of conscience or religious belief. An Adobe file will come up. You print the 2-page form, statement of conscience or religious belief, Immunization of Student Pupils Act. Now, as we said in the previous video, There is issues trying to get this page to actually populate. If you use Chrome, it will not work unless you have the most up-to-date professional version of Adobe Reader. We did manage to get the form to populate on Microsoft Edge. However, when we tried to save the file, it would not save. So in my case, I did go through this process with a close family member, and we actually had our lawyer print the form out for us. Once you print out the form, the parent or guardian who is requesting the non-medical, conscious, or religious belief exemption for their child attending a school in Windsor, Essex County, must complete an online education session. That is available at learn.wechu.org. That is the Windsor, Essex County Health Unit. You sign up for an account. You will watch the video entitled Non-Medical Conscious or Religious Exemption Education Session. You answer the questions, and once you finish the questions, you will print off the completion certificate. The Statement of Conscious or Religious Belief Immunization of Student Pupils Act 2-page form and the Health Unit Education Session Completion Certificate must be notarized. My suggestion is to have it notarized by a lawyer. The fee is around $60 depending. There are online services where you can get notarization for free. But if you're in my opinion, I would go through a lawyer specifically because they can answer any questions for you. I went through Clamoni Law. They are located at 410 Giles Boulevard East in Windsor. The phone number is 519-258-3632. Once you have all of the paperwork notarized, you need to take it in person to the health unit that is located on Olette Avenue. And to reiterate, it is the person who is asking for the exemption, the parent or guardian, who needs to hand deliver these documents. The clerk at the health unit will send you to the 4th floor with the ticket which has the room number. Once you arrive at the room, a clerk will take all of your documents and scan them into their system. They will also send a copy to the school board. They do not need to keep the paper copies. So I highly suggest, please keep all of your notarized original copies. Make a copy of all documents and staple them into your child's school agenda. These forms are valid until the child graduates. If a child changes school within Ontario, any new school will also receive a digital copy. Regardless, if your child changes schools, send a copy with your child. So that's a quick recap of how to go through the process of having your child exempt from the immunization schedule. And a side note, the COVID-19 vaccine is not part of this process. It is not part of the immunization schedule, so you cannot get an exemption for the COVID-19 vaccine.
That's right. You still have to fight that battle like the old ways 2 years ago and currently.
So just wanted to give a recap on that because, as we said, we have gotten a lot of feedback from parents that indeed the pressure is on regarding this situation.
Hey, we got a comment here. First of all, hi, Rich. And Joey has a comment. I wish we knew this last year. We folded because the date came before our daughter's suspension. We decided to homeschool and looking at Christian private school. Well, both those options, if you're asking my opinion or our opinion, both those options are a better option than crappy public school or crappy Catholic school. And I say that not because the idea of it is crappy, but what it has become has been turned to crap. I don't need to go into all the details of why it's crap. Most people already know it is. If you want to know my opinion on that in detail, go ahead and ask it and I'll spit it out. But yeah, homeschool, depending on your schedule, depending on, what you are like as a parent, your time, the money you guys have, many factors, but depending on the Christian school as well. A lot of churches closed and caved to the pandemic. A lot of churches have rainbow flags and alter the Bible in order to accommodate and have bigger services. So it all depends. If you want a Christian school that is, well, being Christian while also protecting the children and educating them, then you can send me privately some questions and I can maybe give you some information of some schools I think are viable. And there's a lot of homeschool options too. We know people, Rich, who's in the chat there, knows lots of groups. He's part and has started some homeschooling parental groups and can link you up with lots of people who are already doing it and who can give you ideas, curriculum, all sorts of areas to start the process. And it's really not that difficult. In fact, it's, I would say, easier. Like working out. The first couple of days is difficult. You're sore. You're sore the second day after than the next day. But once you get into the groove of it, not only are kids going to benefit greatly from homeschooling, you're going to notice, even if you think you don't know anything as a parent, like, what do I know? I can't teach them this. It'll be better than the public school education. And again, I can elaborate on that if you want, but I promise it will be better. All you got to do is show up with curriculum of your choice.
I would like to add that I understand that many parents out there do not have the luxury. Maybe they don't have the finances. Both parents in the home are working and they have no choice but to put their children in the public system. That is precisely why we did this video, to give those parents peace of mind that even though they do have to send their child to these indoctrination centers, that they have a way to protect their children if they feel that they do not want to have them immunized according to the health unit's schedule.
I agree with that sentiment. However, I disagree. It is a choice. In my opinion, it's always a choice. A very difficult one, which I've had many people yell at me, who do you think you are? I don't think I'm anybody. I'm not judging. I'm just saying that everything's a choice. You can choose to send your kids to public school and say, how dare you? I have a job, or how dare you? And again, you can say, how dare you? I'm not mad when I'm saying it. I'm just simply saying we have put these walls up in our Western society that says I need to make a certain amount. I need to have a certain amount of nice things in my home. I need to have. But where were those parameters set? Do you need to have that, or do you want to have that? What matters more? Your need for cable and all the channels you choose, or your child's education? Or if it's not the education, how their behavior and their personality will be 10, 15 years from now after an indoctrination in the public school, so you can have the amenities that you think are not a choice to have. And again, I wouldn't say things that I haven't already said to myself in my own mind. Having said that, I understand that we live in this world and there are so many things that draw us close. And if we feel we have to prioritize them in a certain way and send our child to public school or Catholic school right now, then that's what this is here for. We're here to help, right? Not hinder, not make fun of. I'm just expressing my opinion on that. I really do think that the public school system is detrimentally dangerous to all children that attend.
I would definitely agree with that statement.
Okay.
So we did receive an email. It's a 3-question email. So we'd like to thank our viewer for reaching out. I'm going to read the first question and then Steve and I can discuss them one by one. So the first question is, I'm noticing a loud divide in the truther community, if that's a good term to use. It's a very disheartening feeling personally, as we need community so desperately at this particular time of charades that are playing out on a global level. How does one cope with such an endeavor? Take it away.
I'm sorry, what was the question? There is a lot of divide. or a lot of fracturing going on. My opinion is we were always in the same personality positions that we are currently in now, where things are fracturing. It's just we had a bridge, a level of time that kind of united us, something that fused us together, which was the pandemic, right? We could all, everyone that could open their eyes to see, could understand that it's clear tyranny. But as the last 6 months about has kind of settled it down, and it was pretty much just about 6 months ago they lifted the last of the restrictions, right, at the border and things. So it wasn't that long ago. But nonetheless, human nature and psychology comes into effect, and people get back into their lives, the either the mundaneness of it or the excitement of the things they couldn't enjoy before. And that feeling of doom that's right around the corner is pushed off. Or even with a lot of people that might have been on the left that were seeing what was happening with the pandemic, start to think the same kind of liberalized thoughts that they had before, like, well, maybe I kind of overthought. Maybe they weren't trying to be so controlling the government. Look, the sun's shining today, or look, we can go through here. So you have some people that kind of alter their stance in that way, and then you have all the myriad of other topics that were under the curtain of mandatory vaccination or face diaper, observed clearly on people's faces. You have abortion issues. You have, well, the school system, the SOGI curriculum issues. You have what's happening in other parts of the country, issues that divide people. There's so many hot button issues that people have a slight difference of opinion. And because we're in that lulled stage right now, everybody wants to feel like they have a first beat on whatever's happening, whether it be from their particular news source or alternate news source. And instead of listening, sometimes you might not need to listen, but sometimes waiting patiently for more information to come out, or waiting for others to catch up, would be a little better than constantly trying to scream and chant freedom on top of every topic. And we're going to have a difference of opinions on a lot of different topics. That's okay. People used to have politically difference of opinions all the time. That was the beautiful thing about a dialogue or a discussion or a debate. The difference is people would come to the table back in the day. They would come to the table with knowledge and information, driven from a passion within. They would seek out, they would go to the library, read books, find information wherever they chose to, but they would seek it out, then they would come to that debate table ready to debate. Where now everybody has more information, more access to information, but instead it's a lot more clickbait, right? It's social media, and then they absorb it as it sounds good, so it's fact. Some people check, some people don't double check that research, and then they roll with it as if it's fact. So there's a lot of waters being muddied right now, and I think that's why there's a lot of disconnect. Also, one of the main reasons, and a lot of people might not like this because of the day and age we're in, but it's God, or lack thereof. If, for example, abortion, we can talk about a million different angles and aspects of pro-life or pro-choice. I'm trying to think of what the talking points are. I can come up with good points for either side. But if you have God out of the equation, then I can rationalize, like I said, quality points for each side. And we see people do it all the time, whether they use the worst case scenario in order to say why we need something. But basically, if you don't have God, then everything you're functioning off of is your own godly opinion, or whoever it is you looked up, right? If The Art of War was the book you chose to read and you admire Sun Tzu, right? If I'm saying his name right, if you're admiring that, then, and I don't have a problem with that book, but if that's where you're getting the top level of your information, or from a psychologist, a philosopher, or a combination of philosophers in the past, then anybody can rationalize anything. After all, the Aztecs and many other civilizations rationalized throwing babies down the pyramid steps in order to get the rain to come to the sun gods. And people brought their children for sacrifice. Again, it's indoctrinated, but my point is, if you don't have God, a steady moral code, the Bible, something that hasn't changed, culture has changed over time, then we're going to have disagreements on a lot of topics because they're uncomfortable. And it's a lot easier to say, well, I'm inclusive, right? That means you're not going to fight with me and you're not going to fight with me. I love you. I don't have any problem with the way you live your life. So you're not going to fight with me. It's a great way to live for a bit, but it's not real. It's fake. Everybody has an opinion on things, and it's derived from the environment that they're in or the things they read. And if you have a relationship with God, then you're going to base everything from a moral standpoint. If you don't, you're going to base everything from what you call a evidence-based scientific standpoint, which is why we get, and I'm going back to abortion, I don't know why we get, it's a clump of cells, right? And that's science, and you get someone who doesn't care about God or believe in God and go, yep, I know science. I took macro or microbiology. It's a clump of cells. Well, guess what? So am I. So are you, right? I mean, when I get technical, we're a clump of cells. Am I going to get aborted? Like, if you believe in God, then you can use rationale, but there's a moral base that you cannot waver from. Even if it's directed at you, you're going to have to look yourself in the eye and adjust yourself, because the Bible don't change. So I think that is one of the big divides, or where people can't come together. Freedom people is because we all want freedom, but we all have a different definition of what freedom is. The definition of freedom hasn't changed in the Bible in thousands of years.
Excellent points. How does one cope with such an endeavor? Very good question. I think it's different for everyone, but as Steve mentioned, I think having a faith-based system is key, something that will help you navigate these troubling waters. As well, you want to stick with like-minded people. You want to stick with critical thinkers. You have to understand that the powers that be use all of these issues to divide us. All these conflicts, as Steve said, from abortion to the conflict in the Middle East, the Russian-Ukraine conflict, conflict in our own country, the school board issues, and the list goes on and on and on. I think one of the keys to remember that we should all remember, whether you're in the freedom movement or not, is it's okay to agree to disagree.
Yeah.
We don't have to agree on every single topic, but we should respect each other. We should hear each other out. We shouldn't disrespect one another, because that's what the system wants. They want to divide us. They want to divide us by race, by gender, or lack thereof. That's their mission. They want us against one another when we need, especially now, to be united together, whether we agree on every single topic or not. That, I think, is critical for us to basically persevere over the evil forces at work.
Exactly. And that's a good point. I didn't say it. I didn't want to sound divisive, but I want to make sure people understand. I think they do by now. I've been rattling on about it, that God is the wind in my sail and holds me accountable, which is why I can look at topics I talk about, and then I look within. And a lot of the times I got to point the finger at myself where I'm veering off, or I'm maybe feeling anger off of a topic or something someone said. And I know right there that I'm in the wrong. I'm approaching it wrong. And I'm going to respond to that person improperly, not the way that I'm supposed to, not the way I should, which will then affect that person going forward, maybe in a negative way. So I need to work on the way I talk with people when trying to come together, because that is the goal, not to divide, but to bring us together. And it's okay if you don't have a relationship with God right now. That doesn't mean that we can't be friends. It doesn't mean that we can't have a discussion. It just means that I do, and I'm not hiding it, and I'll be free and happy to talk about it. And maybe one day you'll have a question about it.
I think another key, at least personally, limit your social media interaction might be also another way to kind of, keep things in perspective. Sometimes clicking and clicking and clicking can drive a person mad. I would also suggest too, if you are in those moments that maybe you are on social media and you're having debates or conversations with people and it is getting heated, take yourself out of the situation, pray on it, meditate on it. I think Steve makes a valid point. A lot of the times it is us, because we're so, either we want to be right, or we have a Joan of Arc complex where we see wrong and it just infuriates us. I know I suffer from that personally. So sometimes it's really, I think, wise to take a step back, take yourself out of the situation, give it some thought, give it some prayer. And then again, the end of the day, I think it's key to treat each and every person with respect. And, there's nothing wrong with disagreement. That doesn't mean that we can't still be friends.
That's right. And before we continue here, we've got a few people that made comments here. Deanna, no, you didn't miss the whole thing, just part of it. And we just kind of briefly went over the part you might have wanted to have seen, which is about the vaccination schedules, which we just kind of went over what was in the previous video. So if you have a question specifically, go ahead and type it in and ask. Holly, hello. Lisa, hi. Joey, again, says, you interviewed my wife when she was let go from Chrysler during Trudeau's visit. Yeah, I remember that. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but I know she spoke as well down at the Parents for Parents' Rights, or the 1 million March for Children, somewhere around there, maybe the week after. But I saw her not that long ago, I think, speak, and that was great that she's still out there, and she was activated, or she was already maybe seeking out freedom. But I bet when Chrysler decided to let her go for the day because of her beautiful shirt she had on, which, they're allowed to wear t-shirts. They don't have a dress code. They're at Stellantis, Chrysler, Delmer, whatever you want to call it, through trades through the years. I'd like to call it gone, but I don't mean your jobs. That's not what I mean. I would like these corporations gone, and other positions to be there for people to fill, of course. Let's see. So yeah, your wife was there, and I did interview her. She was brave for stepping out and staying and talking. So that was, she was fired. Well, have she filled out any paperwork? Has she gotten in touch with a lawyer or anything like that, Joey? In the meantime, Deanna says, has anyone in here went through the vax exemption forms for school? I don't know if anybody that's listening right now has, but as I said, Dee, we are going to do a episode where we're going to bring on a couple people to speak directly on that. And there are lots of people in our groups that have, unfortunately, had to do it and have done it in years past, and lots of people this year. So we're just going to gather them. And the issue is finding the time to quickly get another episode up, because we've got guests lined up for the time slots that we have over the next month or so going forward. But we will get that information out. And as I said, you have time. So as much as we do want to get the ducks in order, you have some time. So it'll be okay.
Deanna, feel free to send us an email at thetruhtrumpet@hotmail.com, and we can send you the information directly. And as well, if you have any questions specific, we can answer them and help you walk through the process. I did go through this process with my godson, so I do have information and would be more than happy to help you. All right. Question. Now, I do see that question. However, we do have 2 more to go through, and we will most certainly get back to that question.
That's a big one.
That is a big one. That'll take a little time. The second question from our email is, I recently experienced a car accident. Unfortunately, the biggest fear I had that day was if I needed to go to the hospital, also known as the murder camp, I will call it. The fear of what to say, what to do, the verbiage they use, and how, if even I'm at all capable to answer questions, let alone procedure information and more. With that being said, is there such a thing in this hugely divided truth community? Who or how would or could a person like myself be able to reach a helper, someone who would be available on the spot for a voice when someone is alone? I was lucky enough to have a retired nurse with me that showed up at the scene of the accident, was able to be my voice.
That is lucky.
Extremely lucky. And that is something I think many of us, myself included, worry about. If we're in a serious accident, what will happen when we go to the hospital?
Well, this is something that unfortunately some people that are in the chat here, myself, Beth to an extent, and a lot of people had to deal with during the last few years. So the first thing I would say is wrap your mind, if you don't already know, around the fact that the hospital, as she said, is like a murder camp. It doesn't mean they're there with knives waiting to stab you the second you walk in the door, but you don't want to really be a patient nowadays in really any Canadian hospital. And I truly mean that. You don't want to be a patient. Whether it's MRSA or other bacterial infections that are rampant throughout the hospitals, I'm not going to say it's a guarantee, getting an infection while in hospital, but it seems to happen quite often with people young and old that go in there as a byproduct of being in there. Besides that, you have to understand too the amount of protocols, procedures, and policies that have been put in place to separate the patient from any external help or factors written in policy so it can expedite the process of the doctors to facilitate help and care for the patient. So if you have a family member kind of irate and, sad in the waiting room or following in, well, protocol and procedure. And here we go. Okay, I'm going to bring it back and tie it without God. Remove God from the equation, and we can rationalize. After all, it's been a pandemic. We can rationalize that as much as the wife or the husband wants to come with the patient, and talk and help out for them, advocate for them, we can't have a secondary viral spreader come in the room. So you're going to have to stay out there, right? Boom. There's a level of separation that didn't exist before this pandemic. So again, if you had God, you got to revisit and look at that. You're not supposed to do that, right? You're not supposed to separate people. You're not supposed to go against certain principalities. I'm not going to get into biblical details, but that just wouldn't be an option in the rationale. But what, ironically, I created 2.5, 3 years ago was something called a personalized standard of care declaration. And it was through this process of seeing people, friends and family members going into hospital and dying and getting killed, or getting treatment that they didn't want, or the family members weeping to me, to Rich, to other people in the Angels group, not understanding what's going on when they clearly have a plan of action for their loved ones, if they're a power of attorney. And a lot of times people didn't have it. But we kind of set forth a pattern of letting people know they need to fill out a personalized standard of care declaration. You should have it filled out. You should have it filled out already. You should have one already. I've had it available for anyone that asks. You can email it out. Stand for the has it and has updated it. The Angels group has it and I believe has updated it to add a couple more medications, or I shouldn't say a couple more treatments they were offering, like no remdesivir, right, on your declaration. So that way, if you are incapacitated, passed out, not conscious, then that piece of paper is on you, or your power of attorney also gives it to them. But on that paper, you have someone indicated of as your power of attorney. That way, if you're not conscious, they either find that paper on you or they have the name of the power of attorney, and that power of attorney is ready, already in the know, already prepared through conversation of friends like her and I are, and you will be taken care of. Because if something happened to her, right, I'd get contacted. Well, there's a mechanism that would happen in a place, and I would get contacted, and I know what to do in these situations, unfortunately, because of friends that have been in the hospital over the last few years. I've had to deal with this many a times and infiltrate the hospital in many different ways. So having that personalized standard of care declaration is your sword in hand. That's your first level of weaponry defense. After that, well, I would say to make sure that you advocate, if you are capable, for yourself while in the hospital. You know, have the phone within reach. You shouldn't have to say this, but this is what they would do, at least to people they didn't like, which at the time were people that refused the shot or people that didn't want to wear a mask. They would segregate you from other people, not come and check in on you as often. It would just be a different level of treatment, and the phone would be moved away to where you couldn't reach it. And if you've been out of breath, if you've had pneumonia or COVID, then reaching over past your extended grasp or reaching area is impossible. Your oxygen blood levels low. Sometimes they have you flipped with what they were doing with respiratory issues. They'd elevate you on one side, and then they'd flip you over on your stomach, which would be really uncomfortable for hours and hours and hours. And all you have the energy and power to do is concentrate on your breathing, which of course, inevitably, they want to put you in a medically induced coma so you can recover. And it doesn't go well from there with most patients. So the best thing I can say right now is advocate for yourself, get prepared ahead of time, have that form filled out, talk to someone you love and trust and loves and trusts you, and make sure that you're a partner for them if something happens. Have them as your emergency contact. Don't have your mother. I don't mean that against your mom or father or a family member. If they are dead set against your principalities or values, then you don't want them as a power of attorney in this situation, because they'll load you up with the exact drugs the doctor says because they put the full trust in the system and the doctors. That's my opinion on that question. So let's see here.
I would like to respond. I'm just actually looking for something relevant to it that I think I should be able to find very shortly.
That's okay. Deanna says, your Steve said he was going to do the whole process for me. Well, I don't know for you, but I'll help you through the process.
Okay. So what I'll have to say about the fact of the hospital, first of all, I completely understand where you're coming from. It's very scary, the thought of being vulnerable, ill, injured, and at the mercy of others. So I have personally taken a few steps to ensure my well-being if I, for some reason, am put in that position. The first thing I would suggest is going on to the Action for Canada website. If you have trouble finding the form I'm going to describe, I'll be more than happy to email it to you. There is a form you can print out called Notice of Liability. And what I did was I printed the form and I actually taped it to my health card, the front and the back of my health card. I taped it just under the stripe that they have to scan so it's not interfering. I also change this form every 3 months, so it's always up to date. I take a picture of my health card, and my power of attorney has a picture of my health card with this documentation. Basically, the notice of liability tells any healthcare professional when you are entered into a hospital, especially if you are unconscious, that they are under no circumstances to intubate you, to give you remdesivir, vaccinate you. All the things that happened during COVID, this notice of liability gives the hospital the information that you are not to have any of these procedures done. This is completely legal. You sign and date it. So again, if you're unconscious, that is on your health card. And I highly suggest the next step, which involves the power of attorney. Your power of attorney should have a picture of your health card with the updated date as proof. And I know this sounds crazy to some of you, but they need to have this to ensure that if that was removed from your health card, that it was in fact on your health card. The other step that I personally took was when I had my will updated last, which was last year. I have what's called I believe it's power of attorney for personal care, and it basically has to do with any health issues. So let's say for your final wishes that you do not want to be resuscitated. You want a do not resuscitate order. You would put this in this document. I took the form that Steve is referring to that he had drawn up, which is the personal standard care document. I took that document and it was added to my personal care in my will. And as well, I had these provisions put into my will. Now, if you have the personal care document, it's a legal document that's notarized by your lawyer. You pick a power of attorney, which is somebody who will be responsible for you if you are incapacitated to make medical decisions on your behalf. I highly suggest it's someone that you trust and that's someone that will be willing to follow your final instructions to the letter. So that's a very important decision to make. I had these provisions put into my document. My power of attorney knows that if something happens to me, that they are to go to the hospital with the document and to call Steve and to present this document to ensure that the hospital will not do any of the following. Under no circumstances am I to be vaccinated with any approved or experimental vaccines. Under no circumstances am I to receive any COVID testing. For greater certainty, no molecular testing, RNA, PCR, and/or no rapid antigen tests are to be administered. Any and all medical tests, medical procedures, and/or medications are to be approved by my power of attorney before application in the event that I am incapacitated. If I am admitted to a hospital and somehow test positive for a coronavirus variant or any virus discovered after the year 2020, I am denying the following standard of care protocols related to COVID patients, which includes but is not limited to remdesivir and ventilation. I insist on being treated with ivermectin, oxygen, nebulizers, or steroids. Under no circumstances am I to receive a blood transfusion. Now, I'm sure some of you are like, wow, that's pretty extreme, but we are in extreme times.
You need it. You need to be extreme because they are.
They are. And as the viewer said, she considers these places murder camps.
Now imagine a lot of people probably feel or are starting to feel, at the very least, everybody feels not just terrible because they're considering going to the hospital nowadays, but I can only imagine, because I've had to go through it too with family members, but that sinking feeling in your stomach knowing that I'm going to go to seek care, and at the very best, I will be waiting 8, 10, 12 hours at best, if not much longer, before I get a prescription, maybe a triage where they try to shove you back out the door quickly, or they just misdiagnose you and the problem persists. And if you do get in, good luck getting a bed. If you're supposed to stay overnight, you'll be shoved in the hallway because the hospitals are full and those hallways are dirty. Those hallways are dirty because they're overstaffed and underpaid. And also, thanks to environmental groups for the past couple decades, they no longer use colloidal silver. They no longer use proper cleaning products that kill bacteria and bacteria infections that are all over surfaces. Now they use environmentally friendly things that are totally safe and effective and approved, just like the paper straws with forever chemicals.
So the advice is be prepared. Prepare ahead of time. Safeguard yourself in any way, shape, or form you can. It is vitally important to have a power of attorney that you trust, as I said. It is vitally important to have documentation on your person and, as I said, on your health card to ensure that your wishes are followed.
Okay.
And as far as people in the freedom movement, there are many different groups that people would be more than happy to be your advocate. Come to the hospital. I know, Steve knows, we know tons of people who have, at the drop of a hat, gone to help assist people. If you need help getting in touch or connected with these groups, we'd be more than happy to help with that. Just send us a line at the Truth Trumpet at hotmail.com.
And as Rich said, exactly. And as you just said that too, picking a power of attorney ahead of time. Don't wait till you're sick. This is something, as it's mundane, of course, like doing fire drills and things like that. But you should have a power of attorney chosen way ahead of time and one that you trust. Really think about it and pull the trigger on it. Have someone you trust that will do what you want medically, whether it's friends, family, or someone in a group that you trust, at least in this aspect, that they will carry forth your wishes when it comes to your medical freedom. Having
a will in general is vitally important. And the nice thing about having a will is there are different sections. You can have a person who takes care of your final affairs. You can have a person that takes care of your financial half, your assets, and you can have a different person for your medical care. But it's vital to have these things in place so that your loved ones are not scrambling or in a position that they don't know your final wishes. And my last thought on this particular topic, when you do decide who your power of attorney is going to be, you can do what I do, and I periodically, much to their dismay, sit them down and remind them of my wishes. I remind them of where the documents are. I send them the picture of my updated health card just to reiterate that this is what's important to me. And of course, this person is someone I trust, and I know that they will do exactly what I need done. And they, luckily for me, my best friend here will offer support. And as I said, if you're in a situation where you need help reaching out to some people in our freedom community who know a lot about this topic, we'll be more than happy to hook you up.
Absolutely.
The final question from our email was advice on continuing the fight to stand tall, stand proud, and keeping your beliefs, faith, and more at an all-time high when being attacked by the dark in all shapes, sizes, and forms, as well as feeling alone on this journey. As we all know, we're all brothers and sisters, and during these times, we need each other and support more than ever before. The last 3 years was just a trailer of what's yet to come at us.
That's right. Agenda 2030 is right around the corner. I'm going to push that off. So what go ahead. Why don't you kick this one off, and then what I'll do is I'll read my answer that I had wrote to Beth earlier, because around 10:11 a.m. I'm a little sharper than I am now, so I'd much rather read what came off my head then than try to ramble on for 5 minutes when it's probably 30 seconds.
So I think my first piece of advice is something we've already brought up, and that is having faith in God. I think that is key to get you through the dark times. Having faith, knowing that we're here for a short time. Putting things into perspective is key. Surrounding yourself with positive people, like-minded people is also important. Keeping yourself aware of what's going on in our world by seeking out information through alternative methods, not just listening to your evening news that gives you the pat on the head and tells you everything's great. Everything is awesome. I think those are some ways that you can safeguard yourself, keep yourself positive. And honestly, we all need to stay in the fight. I think that this last period, as Steve said, a lot of the restrictions ended about 6 months ago, but there are still restrictions. They still require masks when you go to the hospital. Things are starting to slowly creep back in because everyone's guards down. Everyone's feeling good. My suggestion is do not ever forget the last 3 years. I had said this on our last broadcast when we were talking to Chris Barber, but to this day, when I go to a restaurant or I go into a store, there's a part of me that actually has gratitude, as I suffered tremendously during that period. I was assaulted in a store. I was threatened. I was threatened with police action, all for being a law-abiding citizen. And that was very traumatic. It was traumatic to be segregated from society for 7 months because I didn't have a vax pass saying that it was okay for me to participate in society. Those are things that happened that we need to keep in perspective. We need to have gratitude that we can go about our daily lives, but we can't forget. And that's why it's so imperative to be strong in your faith, to surround yourself with people that are like-minded, and to constantly seek information and seek the truth. I think those are some critical ways that you can stay away from the negativity and the darkness that the evildoers are constantly throwing our way.
Absolutely.
Now, do you want to read the text that we were talking about earlier? Or?
Well, that doesn't necessarily fit with here. That's more of the reason why. But yeah, I'd agree that again, for me, it's rooted in my stability over the past few years has become rooted in God. These times can shake anyone. You know, everybody has a different vice or has a different mechanism that can get triggered by the system. What might bother or upset one person might be a breeze for someone else, but they're bothered by something else altogether. For me, where I'm a little tricky, I'm left-handed, which sets me differently in my brain patterns than, you righties. Doesn't make me a leftist, left-handed. It's my right hand. So my point being is we all have these different mechanisms. And for me, I don't know if scared is the right word, although it's possible. I didn't feel the feeling of being scared, but looking back at the first year where I was chanting freedom, like a lot of people, but I knew what the Agenda 2030, the 15-minute cities. Of course, it's not labeled that, but to us it is. But all these things are happening, and we can pull our hair out, go crazy over the fact that that ball keeps rolling, keeps turning, and we get closer. And we can spin ourselves out and cause chaos in our own life. But that literally all that does is cause chaos. So first, you have to find a way, in my opinion, to center yourself. For me, for us, that's God. right? And I don't have to look for a certain power within myself. You know, if the Klaus Schwabs decide, or the UNs, right, or the World Health Organization decide to come into our homes individually and remove family members in a safe and dignified manner, to quote one of the crappy gentlemen from the World Health Organization that said they would do that through policy, you know, that did, and it is freaking out type of rhetoric. But there's a certain peace knowing that there's things that I can control and there's things that are out of my control. So I can scream at the top of my lungs that things are happening, or I can yell freedom and say, we got to have another convoy. Let's have another convoy. Let's convoy everything. I'm not saying not to, but we have to calm ourselves, find a way to find our center so we can be calm and think collectively on how we beat the tyranny. Or we also, because the enemy also looks on multiple fronts on how to get us, we need to prepare ourselves for not how to defeat the enemy, but how to handle the storm as we go through the deluge that the enemy brings forth. And if we get into Agenda 2030, and I believe we will, I simply believe it's just a matter of the python grip and twisting and letting go, and people will breathe. Like right now, the time frame we're in right now, people are, can we travel? Maybe they're not. Maybe they're not going to bring masks back. It's already the end of November almost. But you're wrong. They will. They have no choice. There's an agenda at play. So whether it's masks or vaccines or a climate lockdown or the 15-minute cities implemented through policy and or destruction of a city, of an area, by accident or on purpose, in order to push forth the policies, in order to add the CCTV cameras on every city block, in order to have the smart grid of the street that has Wi-Fi connected to it, in order to have all these measures that are just subtly put in, right? The lack of parking spaces for apartment buildings. Oh, but look, there's a greener tree over there. It's much more beautiful to look at. I can ride my bike. All these little things that we have to prepare ourselves for, on how to not just combat it to win, but if that plan doesn't come to fruition, how to go through the fire while protecting ourselves, our family, and most importantly, our souls. So I think that's what we have to do, is fortify ourselves with strength. And where you draw that strength from, only you can decide.
Wise words. So we can go back to, what are your thoughts on 15-minute cities? Do you think our governments are trying to implement them here? Now, I don't know where you mean by here. If you mean Canada, yes. If you mean Windsor, Essex, yes. If you mean in the free world, yes. Pretty much everywhere.
Yeah. And as we stated, it's implemented through policy. It's kind of like, well, the gentleman here that brought it up called it 15-minute cities. And that's why there's kind of divide on the mainstream front, or the left side, the right side, however you want to look at it.
They're also referred to as smart cities.
Smart cities. There's also, if you look at the UN or the WHO, you have sustainable development, and all of their policies. I believe it's 17 they have on the UN website. You can find a lot of crap that condemns themselves. They condemn themselves, at least from my perspective, right on their website. In fact, they have videos you can watch. You don't have to read material. You can watch their little cartoony videos that lead you into how they tiptoe into tyranny, but in a good way. Again, their slogan, right? You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. So they can paint this video picture of how they'll guide us through, and it's always a best or worst case scenario. For abortion, they use the worst case scenario to sell you on why it should be sold, or the taxpayer should fund it for everybody and everything. In this case, they utilize the best case scenario. I'm going to stop there before I ramble on. even more. All right. So go ahead and pick up here and I'll collect my thoughts and continue on.
To Steve's point, all of these agendas are in plain sight for all to see. Would highly recommend that you go on the UN website, go on the WEF website, seek out alternative news and type in the words 15-minute cities, smart cities, CBDC. They're all connected. When I was running for municipal election last year in 2022 in the fall, that was a big push locally for things regarding the master transit plan, all of these initiatives that sound great on paper, that we're all doing our part. But the reality is there are places, unfortunately, I can't think of the name of the town in England, where they're already starting to limit the movements of the citizens, where they basically essentially almost have to ask permission to leave their city. They're starting to implement credits in different areas as pilot projects. Again, these are all documented initiatives. It's not just hearsay or things that Steve and I are making up or conspiracy theories. As you can see, I think Steve is sharing the screen right now.
So this is the United Nations website for the 17 goals. So like I was saying, they utilize the best case scenarios. So when they sell people on a vision of what a city will look like, you won't need a car because you'll have a bike lanes or escalators in the streets, which you should be able to believe they existed at one point in time in our history, not yours and I's, but in modern history, they existed and were taken apart. That aside, they want to sell you on the beautiful picture of what the best case scenario could be, just like every single policy that's written, right? They write policy on the best case scenario. And as we all know, every time, oopsie, it never is what they say it is. An example, the COVID vaccine is 95% safe and effective, one shot and you're good, right? On paper, that on policy, best case scenario, people buy into it. It turns out to be 0% effective. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it might as well be, and very detrimental and harmful. And you need, well, as we know now, you need forever amount of boosters. So just like when they have, oh, look, to have no poverty, here's another goal, right? To have zero hunger. It's a computer. They all sound great. Good health and well-being. Pick one country in the world that has solved any of these problems, and I'll give you a cookie. But how is it that anybody on the left, I mean, I see how I view it, but how can anyone look at this stuff? Go ahead and click on one and just see what it says. How can anyone look at this stuff and go, oh, great, this unelected body, this unelected governing body is going to implement this globally and it's going to work, yet we haven't been able to make it work anywhere with our own attempts for ourselves, who we care about automatically. But this group of unelected officials are going to dive into all different countries with all different infrastructure and make magic happen without anybody feeling harm, disparaging feelings, loss of life. Yeah, right. It's been happening and it's going to keep happening. The UN is one of the biggest mass murderers in the name of peace, in my opinion, and in fact, throughout the last 50 or 60, 70 years.
And again, they use such great words, such flowery words. So, for example, goal number 11, which is sustainable cities and communities. So, AKA 15-minute cities, smart cities.
Yeah.
Make cities and human settlements inclusive. Funny how that's the first word. Safe, resilient, and sustainable. Again, they're all buzzwords. Let's just, for curiosity, more information. I'm just curious. Oh, we got a little slideshow. Oh, no, it's just going through the different ones. So right there, like, I wanted to know more about this, but you're giving me related topics. You're not actually telling me what you plan on doing to make cities and human settlements inclusive.
No, they don't want to do that. They just want to have the happy buzzwords and just show you that everything will be okay. Everybody can get on a UBI, Universal Basic Income, right? After all, things cost way too much in inflation. They're going to have to go to digital currency, but they have a plan to make sure we're all safe. And then once we get rid of our carbon breathing cars and ride our bicycles in our 15-minute cities, we'll be able to travel to another city or town if we want. I mean, if we've done the right things on our social credit score, because if everything's digital, then if I haven't been updated on, let's say, my shot, well, I can't go. When someone in the freedom movement might say, well, buddy, get in your car and go, right? Honk, honk. And well, I'd agree. But remember, policy's been putting into place. They have on some streets currently, soon to be all, red light cameras, right? They have new zoomed in cameras, the black ones that rotate and everything that can see what you're doing inside of a car. You're not going to be able to leave town. Again, there are people in China that can move around freely, but those people pay for it, right? Or they make so much money that if they have a reduction in their social credit score, it doesn't matter. They have enough credit still to be able to afford the things. So when someone like me 5 years ago says meat's going to be illegal, I was trying to be quick because I ramble on, right? It doesn't mean it necessarily will be illegal, but it'll be just like the fireplace when I said fireplaces will be illegal. They will budget it out of existence. So you or I choose, right? So at the dinner table, and nobody ever wants to admit defeat, right? So most people are going to sit there and go, oh, it sucks. We're not allowed to eat. I mean, there'll be some people that will do it, but there'll be a lot of families, a lot of people that'll be like, I don't really want to eat meat anyway. That's fine. Yeah, I know it's there, but I decide I only have meat at Christmas time when I choose to spend the $200 on a whatever the crappiest flank on flank, $200 for one flank steak. I would do it every day, no problem. I don't want to. Red meat is not good for me, right? A lot of people will say that. They don't mean it in their heart, right? If they could, they would have different cuts of red meat every day. But the truth is, it will be marketed out of existence for certain people. And other people, if they decide to bite the carrot that dangled in front of them, comply with everything, I guess they'll have a higher social credit score to start and they'll indulge on things. But everything always catches up to everybody. So you might as well fight these battles ahead of time. And I personally always want to have a vehicle. I don't care if I'm traveling 30 seconds because I feel like being lazy. Not that I should. But if I want to go to the store down the street in my vehicle that pumps out some CO2, some carbon, right? Not CO, carbon monoxide, then I'm going to do it. And if I'm going to travel to Thunder Bay, then I'm going to do it. If I want to drive across the world and throw up planks to make a bridge across water, I'm going to do it because I can. And if I can afford the gas, I'm going to do it. And no one's going to tell me I have to be contained in an area because a cow over there farted too many times and they don't pay attention to that volcano that just spit out more carbon than all of the industry that we currently have in our modern world. I'm not buying it, and neither should you. And yes, it's being implemented everywhere.
I know that it may sound a little crazy what we just went through, but I can assure you the powers that be, the unelected officials of many of the letter organizations that we brought up, do in fact want to control everything. And all you have to do is look to China at their social credit system to see what possibly could be in store for North America. Mm-hmm. And again, don't take our word for it. We say this often and we'll continue to say it. Do your own research. Look things up. Find alternative means. If you're struggling to find this information, reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to recommend some websites. Off the top of my head, some sources that are great for information. The Health Ranger, Mike Adams, David Icke, InfoWars, Rebel News. There's a bunch. It's just off the top of my head. But again, go to their websites. Go to their official websites. And in the words of Klaus Schwab, he's infiltrated our cabinet, as in Canada's cabinet, as in Canada's government. These are on record comments that the man made, basically saying, hey, guess what, Canada? I've got half of your government in my pocket, and they're going to do over half. And they're going to do exactly what I direct them to do. And this should horrify you. And I'm not saying that you should panic, but you should take action by, number one, educating yourself. Number two, surrounding yourself with like-minded people and trying to find solutions in your own communities, whether that be attending city council meetings, school board meetings, having protests in the sense of going to shopping malls and handing out information on what a smart city, 15-minute city are. People might look at you like you're crazy, but I can't tell you how many times people looked at us crazy when we went out during the pandemic to try to give people facts and information about all of the topics, remdesivir, ventilation, vaccines, etc. But it starts with each and every one of us banding together to say no and fighting back that we will not accept these draconian measures that they want to implement. Again, look at China. That's what's in the pipeline for us if we don't start taking action. And that's part of the reason Steve and I started this podcast, is we wanted to give people information. We wanted to give them an alternative view of information that's out there. And again, we don't know everything. We do research all the time. And Steve specifically has for about almost 20 years on many of the topics that we've discussed, many of the organizations that we've discussed. This is not something that just came up overnight. This is decades and decades in the making. And it is going to take some time to undo, but it's not impossible. But it starts with each one of us. In my opinion, it also starts with having a relationship with God.
That's right. I can't really stress that enough, as there's lots of faults and flaws that I personally have. And I know, instead of when I'm upset or angry and looking outward as to who the problem is or why the problem is occurring, even if the words I'm saying or the point I'm making is correct, there's still many ways that you can be wrong, or maybe you're not wrong, but hurt somebody, right, in the way you're talking. And that, if you have God on your side, or if you I shouldn't say God on your side, if you are utilizing the Bible as a moral measuring stick, then more often than not, if you're doing it properly, and there's a lot of people out there who are religious or bad at being religious, if you want to call it that, that utilize, and I think it's more people than the other way around, that utilize their religion or the Bible as a weapon against people, or they cherry pick certain points, and they use their silver tongue to harm other people without bearing any fruit from the silver tongue they used. And I possibly could be guilty of that. And I'm pointing the finger back at myself to make sure that I hold myself accountable with the things I say. And now even more so with how I say it to people, because as some of these questions pointed out, in the end, we need to either stay together or come together. We need to unite as people. For me, I think that has to happen under God, only because we need to define everything the same. And everything's been so diluted in our society that the only buoy, the only
Life preserver?
Yeah, a life preserver. The only ship in the distance that you see is this Bible that hasn't changed over 2 or more thousand years. And for all I know, it could be longer. If they find more scrolls, that are 5,000 years old that match. The point being is you have something that doesn't waver. We waver. We change. We get pressured, right? When we feel pressure, we try to find a way to ease that pain and that pressure and get out of it. But if you're truly looking through the lens of the Bible, then more often than not, you point that measuring stick back at yourself and adjust your behavior, because what we want is love, peace, unity, and to come out of this without the corruption on the other end. And in my opinion, by getting rid of God in the Bible, that has sparred over the generations, the last few generations, the last 5 or 6 decades. Removing God has left a vacant hole for evil to fill that void, and boy, has it filled it well. And it looks fancy. It dresses up nice, right? That evil looks good, and it's so tempting. That's the point of lead us not into temptation, and forgive us for our sins, because we are tempted. So if we do that and we move forward on that manner, then we improve ourselves. And if we improve ourselves, lo and behold, even if it's a small percentage, just one person, we're improving the world. And if everybody does a little bit in that way, then we uplift ourselves. We uplift each other as well.
As a society, as a world.
Amen.
Amen. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions for this evening, and it's hard to believe, but we're almost an hour and a half in. One thing about Steve and I, we can talk. That's why we're friends. And quick story, that's actually one of the reasons we started this podcast as well. Steve and I, over the years, have had some really long, in-depth conversations about many of the topics that we kind of brushed on today. And at one point, we were like, wow, we could do a podcast. We could talk about some things. However, we've been very blessed over this journey to have so many incredible people for us to interview. And actually, I'd like to take a moment just to recognize that and thank all of our previous guests for coming on the Truth Trumpet, for sharing their stories, for encouraging all of us, especially people from our church who have given us their time, people out in the community who are fighting for you and I in different ways. It means a lot to us that these people took time out of their busy schedules to try and enlighten our audience. So we very much appreciate everyone who's been on the Truth Trumpet. And we're actually very looking forward to the future. We do have some really great interviews lined up for the month of December. Steve's taking a little vacay at the end of the month, so I'm actually going to have a guest host on with me next week, and I'm very much looking forward to that, and I think you will as well. And hopefully it'll be more fantastic guests in the new year as well. We plan on continuing to broadcast as long as we have an audience and as long as people want to come on and talk to us. So any final thoughts for you?
I need another coffee.
It's a little late.
Well, just know that even though this here is a question and answer, there's going to be more episodes, and that is going to spur more people and hopefully more questions, because unfortunately we're just a two-man team right here, right? And we're not the most tech savvy, so we don't have a production team behind the scenes to throw things up, because there's so many things. As Beth said, I've been kind of doing this for a couple decades now, absorbing information and researching, deep researching into these topics, in living in the Windsor area, when at least observing out there, there wasn't really any other people that I came across that was diving into the alternate news on all topics. I don't mean crazy conspiracy stuff, just not the mainstream. I was doing it, and I did it by chance. I did it to debunk or to what do you call it when you try to call someone out like a magician? You try to prove that they're scamming you. Okay, she doesn't know.
Sorry.
You know what I'm talking about. When you try to
Disprove?
there you go. That's another word. Disprove what they're claiming, right? So Infowars was an example. Alex Jones was going on about the MMR vaccine. So I thought, I got time off. I got injured at work, so I had time off. I thought, I'll disprove this guy. I'll be the person to disprove him. So I listened for a couple minutes, and he starts rattling off the top of his head in the CDC, the section and subsection and what it says in it. Well, I pause it and I go, that's easy enough, right? That's shallow research. I'll just go to the CDC website, pull up the section, pull up the subsection, and it's not going to say what he said. That's ridiculous. And boom, I proved it. So I went there, I went to the subsection, and holy crap, it was exactly as he said. Many points he had said, but one of them was 1 in 3,000 will suffer from grand mal seizures from the MMR vaccine. And I thought, well, that's crazy. That's a regular vaccine schedule. 1 in 3,000. How many people are in Windsor? It was the way my brain was thinking. 200-ish thousand. If 1 in every 3,000, it's 3,000, 6,000, 9,000, 12,000. Holy crap. That's a handful of people that get grand mal seizures every year just in my city. That's a problem. Isn't that worse than getting measles or the mumps in a first world country? And then that made me look up another point to disprove. And I kept not being able to disprove these points through researching. And somehow, some way, because of that process that I didn't really want to do, I just wanted to be a smartass probably and disprove this guy. But instead, it started changing my heart, where all the distractions, the things I love and enjoy, right? So when someone brings up a topic and you, like everybody does, and everyone knows the answer, or they don't care about the answer, so they just quickly say, yeah, this is the answer and move on. And then there's always some that goes, well, but hold on. And they talk more, and that's why we have people on the left that chant racist, because they don't have anything else to say. They don't care. They just want to go back to the thing that distracts them that they love. My point being is the basketball, right? We used to watch basketball all the time and a couple other TV shows that I'm not even going to mention again. But those were things that we would enjoy doing. So I put aside, if someone said, hey, can you look this up? Not that anybody ever said that to me back then it would be, after the basketball game or after the 5 basketball games. And then, I'd be too tired or too full from the nachos and, whatever. It doesn't really matter about the UN. They're there to help the world after all, right? It says so in their title. And you can take that position. But what happens after you start not disproving something and being led down a path and going, oh, wow, this is true. They're saying this guy's a liar, but this point is clearly true. And you start looking up more points, and a couple months later, or maybe a year later, you look back at your life and you realize, I can't wait to try to look up this corruption. I can't wait to try to find this out. And the football game or the basketball game, it's like, well, they're going to wear some rainbow patch or something over their eyeball to virtue signal anyway. I don't want to see that, right? So you end up moving away from those distractions anyway and focusing on things that matter. To bring it back, I think that was God that did that for me. Set me on a path, or else now I might have been vaxxed. I don't know. I don't know how I would have thought if I hadn't started that ball, moving that ball down the court and getting to where I'm at now. That's the amazing thing, how life works. You have to kind of let go and put your trust in something greater than yourself. Potentially, and hopefully not Beelzebub, the other way around.
We hope you enjoyed our episode this evening. As I said, this is a little new format for us. We were very curious how you felt about the episode. Likes, dislikes, etc. You can reach out to us at any time, thetrunthtrumpet@hotmail.com.
Oh, and we're going to be having an episode coming up next month regarding Well, the hospitals, right? We'll have some stories, people that went to the hospital. So on some of the topics we were talking about earlier, people that were brought in because of the pandemic, quarantined within the hospital, not released from the hospital, or the hospital wouldn't release them, giving them bad protocols. We're going to have some great stories of people who survived the hospital with help from angels, right? Not literal angels from up there, but a group of angels who are helping in the medical field throughout this entire crappy medical distraction of a pandemic that we had over the last couple of years. So if you are another person who was in the hospital, maybe on a ventilator and survived, quarantined on the COVID floor, treated badly, if you have a story from in the hospital, perhaps someone within an angel group or someone you know snuck in some schmeibermectin and some stuffy bears. If you have a story like that, then maybe you want to be part of that show too. But we're going to have some people whose lives were saved and who are living right now because they were pulled from that death camp of a hospital and helped, not by the people in the hospital, but by angels outside or angels in the outfield.
Exactly, which is also a great episode to check out. That's the thing. Check out our list of episodes on our Rumble channel. They're all posted there. We have a lot more difficulty posting our episodes on Facebook and YouTube. So Rumble is the best place to see our content. We thank you so much for tuning in. We thank you for your comments and feedback. Great show, guys. Thank you so much for the comment. And I did have one other comment, which was, this channel rocks, and I so appreciate all the truths you share with all of us, including those who have taken the time to be on your show. And I couldn't agree with that particular sentiment more.
Thank you. And we'll do our best every time. We'll try to improve, at least in maybe our demeanor. But you know, what you see is what you get, at least with me. If you don't like a point I make, of course you can tell me, and of course we can discuss it. I'll always I'll always be respectful. And if I'm not, I expect you to hold me accountable. As a Jew Christian, I expect you to hold me accountable so I can adjust my behavior if need be in order to follow what I said I'm going to follow, and in order to bridge the gap of communication so we can come together, because I don't want to fight with people. I want to either enlighten or become enlightened for us to come together and move forward together.
We want this broadcast to be something that brings us together, united, whether we agree or disagree on every topic. The point is, Steve and I always are seeking the truth, and we want to bring you the truth in the best way that we know how, which is being ourselves.
Yep.
Like it or love us. That's or not love us. That is the way it is. So again, thank you so much for tuning in this evening. And as I said, we've got some great things coming up over the next month. So we hope that you will tune in then. In the meantime, have a wonderful evening. And as always, God bless.
And you are loved.